3 days had passed since Jake and Lisa arrived at the space station. Every day brought new tests that felt more like questioning than science. They took samples of their blood, scanned their bodies, asked endless questions, and watched everything. They did. The whole time, they were kept in rooms that felt like jail cells. The mind tests show you could be very violent, Dr. Velanya told Jake during one of their meetings. She was a reptile-like scientist with kind eyes, different from the other council members who seemed afraid of humans. But I find this result strange. It doesn't match what I see when I watch you. Jake looked up from the thinking test he was doing. What do you mean? Velanya looked around nervously before moving closer. The computer files say that all Class Omega species show what the Council calls Death World Madness. They say you can't control violence, can't fit in with civilized society, and have broken minds. But you and your friends show none of these problems. What happened to the other Death World species? Lisa asked directly from across the room. She was doing physical tests that would have killed most aliens. They were moved to preserve galactic peace, Velanya said, but her voice suggested she wasn't sure about the official story. That night, when the station was quiet, Jake made a choice. Using skills he had learned from years of studying life in Earth's most dangerous places, he slipped out of his room and started exploring the station's computer files. The security systems were designed to keep out civilized species who followed rules. They were useless against a human who had once spent 6 months studying bacteria inside an active volcano. Jake's small size let him move through maintenance tunnels that no other species would have thought to use. The main computer was in a restricted part of the station. Jake's hands shook as he opened the files marked Class Omega Historical Records. What he found made his blood turn cold. The HFY from planet Kepler 442b. Moved after showing too much problem-solving ability and territorial aggression. Population, 2.3 billion. Status, quarantine planet Epsilon 9. The Mordun from Proxima Centauri C. Moved because of uncontrollable mutations and resource competition. Population, 847 million. Status, quarantine planet Theta 2. Species after species. Each marked as Class Omega, each moved to quarantine planets. Jake's training in alien biology helped him understand what the clean reports really meant. These weren't moves to better places. These were prisons. But the worst discovery came when he checked the current status reports for the quarantine planets. Every single one showed the same note. Population, going down. Estimated survival time, 5,200 standard years. The Galactic Council wasn't moving Death World species for their safety. They were slowly killing them through starvation and isolation. Jake was so focused on the data that he almost missed the soft footsteps behind him. He turned around to find Lisa coming out of a different maintenance tunnel, her face dark with anger. "Found something interesting?" she asked quietly. "How did you get here?" "Please. I'm a combat engineer. I've been mapping this station's security since day one." Lisa moved to another computer and started her own search. "I've been tracking supply reports. Want to guess how much food and medicine gets sent to those quarantine planets?" Jake already knew the answer would be terrible. "Barely enough to keep 10% of their reported populations alive," Lisa continued, her voice getting harder. "Jake, they're not just moving these species. They're killing them. Slow, quiet killing that lets the Council say they didn't do anything wrong." "We have to get this information back to Earth," Jake said, copying files to a storage device. "We will," Lisa replied. "But first, we need to understand why. What makes Death World species such a threat to them?" The answer came from someone they didn't expect. Dr. Velanya appeared at the entrance to the computer room, moving quietly despite her large size. "Because we adapt," she said softly. "Because we survive what should kill us. Because we solve problems that confuse civilized minds. Because we threaten the established order just by existing." Jake and Lisa got ready to run or fight, but Velanya raised her hands peacefully. I have been watching the Council's policies for decades, she continued. I have seen 17 species marked as Class Omega. All of them had traits that could have helped the galaxy enormously. They were tough, creative, determined, able to live in conditions that would destroy Council worlds. And the Council saw that as a threat, Lisa said, understanding now. The current Council structure depends on a carefully kept hierarchy, Velanya explained. Species like yours, with your unlimited potential for growth and adaptation, represent chaos to their ordered universe, so they eliminate that chaos. Not this time, Jake said firmly, securing the last of the data files. Humanity doesn't go quietly. As alarms began to sound throughout the station, the three of them realized their investigation had been discovered. But they had what they needed, the truth about the Galactic Council's biggest secret. Now they just had to survive long enough to tell everyone about it. The alarm sounds echoed through the station as security forces started looking for them. But Lisa's knowledge of the station's layout kept them one step ahead through maintenance tunnels and service corridors. We need to warn Captain Henderson, Jake said, holding tight to the storage device that contained proof of the Council's crimes. Already done, Lisa replied, touching her emergency communicator. I sent our distress signal 20 minutes ago. The Liberty should be getting ready to leave right now. Dr. Velanya looked worried. If you leave now, the Council will simply deny everything. They will claim you stole secret information and use it as justification for immediate quarantine, measures against your species. Then what do you think we should do? Jake asked as they stopped at a crossroads, listening for pursuit. We take the evidence directly to the Council chamber, Velanya said. Force a public hearing. There are species on the Council who have grown uncomfortable with these policies, but they don't have the courage to speak without proof. Lisa shook her head. That's suicide. We walk into that chamber and we'll never walk out. Maybe, Velanya agreed, but your data proves that the Council has been systematically destroying entire civilizations. Some truths are worth dying for. The sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for them. This way, Velanya hissed, leading them down a corridor that led toward the heart of the station rather than the docking bays. As they moved deeper into the station, Jake's scientific mind was processing what they had discovered. Velanya, how many species currently sit on the Council? 47 member species, representing over 3,000 worlds. And how many of those member species came from what you would classify as death worlds? Velanya's silence was answer enough. 0, Lisa concluded. Every single Council species evolved on paradise worlds with stable weather, plenty of resources, and minimal survival pressure. No wonder they see us as monsters. They reached the outer rooms of the Council Hall, where Ambassador Zekthor was waiting with a squad of heavily armed security guards. His silver eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. Dr. Martinez, Engineer Thompson, Dr. Velanya, he said formally, you are charged with unauthorized access to classified materials and conspiracy against galactic security. Give us the stolen data, and your deaths will be swift. Deaths? Jake stepped forward, his usual mild manner hardening. Not relocations? Not quarantine? Just straight to execution now? Zekthor's expression didn't change. Your species presents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. The data you have stolen contains sensitive information about Council security protocols. We cannot allow it to be spread. What we've stolen, Lisa said loudly, her voice carrying to the various alien beings moving through the corridor, is evidence that the Galactic Council has committed genocide against 17 different species. Evidence that every Class Omega relocation has been a death sentence. Murmurs began spreading through the gathering crowd of aliens. Zekthor's expression tightened with anger. Silence. These Death World primitives seek to destabilize our peaceful order with lies and propaganda. Then, let's put it to a vote, Jake said, showing the data storage device. Full Council session. Public hearing. Let every member species examine the evidence and decide for themselves. The Council does not bow to the demands of primitives, Zekthor started to say. Actually, a new voice interrupted, under Section 47 of the Galactic Charter, any evidence of systematic violations of sentient rights must be brought before a full council session. The speaker was a tall, graceful being with skin that changed colors as she moved. Jake recognized her as Ambassador Lyranus of the Altair Collective, one of the more progressive council members. Ambassador Lyranus, Zekthor said through gritted teeth. These beings are classified as dangerous entities. They cannot be permitted to address the council. The classification itself is what's being challenged, Lyranus replied smoothly. If there is evidence that the Class Omega protocols have been misapplied, the Council has a duty to investigate. More. Council members were arriving, drawn by the commotion. Jake could see the momentum shifting as curiosity overcame fear. These beings had built their civilization on principles of justice and order. Even if those principles had been corrupted, they still held symbolic power. The truth was about to come out, and there was nothing Zekthor could. The crowd of aliens grew larger as news of the confrontation spread through the station. Jake could see beings from dozens of different species gathering in the corridors, their faces showing curiosity and concern. Some were whispering to each other in languages the translation machines couldn't handle. Ambassador Zekthor looked around at the growing crowd with obvious displeasure. Very well, he said finally, his voice tight with anger. This hearing will be conducted under maximum security protocols. Any attempt at deception or violence will result in immediate termination. We accept those terms, Jake said before anyone could object. He knew this might be their only chance to tell the truth. As they were escorted toward the council chamber, Dr. Vel Anya leaned close to Jake and Lisa. Remember, most of these beings have never seen a true death world or understood what it takes to survive on one. They fear what they don't understand. Your task is not just to present evidence, but to make them understand that survival itself can be a virtue. The massive doors of the council chamber opened before them, revealing a huge round room filled with representatives from dozens of species. The chamber was built like an ancient theater, with rows of seats rising up from a central platform where the accused would present their case. Jake had studied alien architecture, but this room still took his breath away. It was beautiful and impressive, designed to make anyone standing at the center feel small and overwhelmed. The ceiling showed images of peaceful worlds under gentle suns, and soft music played in the background. This whole place is designed to intimidate, Lisa whispered as they walked toward the center platform. Look at the seating arrangement. Everyone looks down on whoever stands in the middle. Jake nodded. Even the lighting was designed to make the central platform feel exposed and vulnerable. But he had given presentations in worse conditions. And least here, no one was shooting at him or trying to eat him. They took their positions at the central platform. 47 different species watched them, with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The chamber's atmosphere was thick with tension, and the subtle hum of translation devices working to convert their words into dozens of alien languages. Ambassador Zekthor stood at the prosecutor's platform, his silver eyes gleaming with confidence. Honored Council, we gather today to address a clear and present danger to galactic civilization. These humans, products of a Class Omega death world, have broken into our most secure databases and stolen classified information in an attempt to destabilize our peaceful order. The evidence speaks for itself, Jake interrupted, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. We're here because the Galactic Council has been systematically exterminating entire species under the guise of relocation for safety. A wave of murmurs swept through the assembled delegates. Several species that Jake didn't recognize were engaged in heated discussions through their translators. Ambassador Lyranus gestured for quiet. Dr. Martinez, you make serious accusations. Present your evidence. Jake activated the holographic display system. and the chamber filled with the images and data they had recovered. Population statistics, resource allocation reports, and status updates from 17 different quarantine planets painted a picture of deliberate genocide. The Mordun of Proxima Centauri C, Jake began, highlighting one of the reports, classified as Class Omega for excessive adaptive capabilities. 200 million beings relocated to quarantine planet Theta 2, which received enough supplies to sustain perhaps 20 million. Current population status, declining toward extinction. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some delegates looked shocked, while others seemed to be checking their own data devices to verify the information. Those supplies were calculated based on civilized consumption standards, Zekthor protested. Deathworld species require excessive resources due to their primitive metabolisms. Lisa stepped forward, her engineer's mind cutting straight to the core of the argument. That's interesting because, according to your own biological surveys, the Mordun actually required fewer calories per individual than most council species. They were adapted for resource scarcity. She pulled up another display showing comparative metabolism data. In fact, every single Class Omega species shows superior resource efficiency compared to council norms. The HFY could synthesize nutrients from materials that would be toxic to council species. The Vorthak could enter hibernation states during resource shortages. More murmurs spread through the chamber. Jake could see that some of the delegates were beginning to look uncomfortable with the official explanations. These adaptations make them more dangerous, not less, Zekthor argued. A species that can survive anywhere, consume anything, adapt to any environment. They represent an existential threat to established civilizations. Or, Jake said quietly, they represent the greatest potential allies you could ever have. The chamber fell silent. Jake continued, his voice growing stronger as he found his rhythm. Every single species you've labeled as Class Omega possessed traits that could have revolutionized galactic civilization. The Thalnari could survive in hard vacuum for extended periods. Imagine what that could mean for space exploration. The Kermoth could process radiation as an energy source. They could have cleaned up environmental disasters that plague council worlds. Instead, Lisa added, you decided they were too dangerous to live because they might upset your carefully ordered hierarchy. Jake activated another display. This one showing images from Earth. This is our homeworld. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's hostile. But look at what that hostility created. The images showed Earth's incredible diversity of life, its complex ecosystems, the intricate relationships between species that had learned to cooperate as well as compete. They showed human cities where millions of individuals from different backgrounds worked together, human expeditions risking their lives to save other species from extinction. Death worlds don't just create killers, Jake continued. They create cooperators. They create innovators. They create beings who understand that survival sometimes means helping others survive too. Dr. Velanya stood up from the observer section. If I may address the council? Zekthor whirled around. Dr. Velanya, you have been relieved of your position for collaborating with these primitives. Actually, Ambassador Lyranis interjected, Dr. Velanya holds tenure under the Academic Freedom Protocols. She has the right to present scientific testimony. Velanya moved to the platform beside Jake and Lisa. I have spent my career studying evolutionary biology across the galaxy. The Council's classification system is fundamentally flawed because it assumes that environmental hostility breeds only violence and instability. She activated her own data display. But analysis of Death World species shows the opposite. Environmental. Pressure creates not just individual resilience, but cooperative intelligence. These species develop complex social structures specifically because individual survival is difficult. The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate was paying attention. Council species, she continued, evolved on worlds where resources were abundant and environmental pressures were minimal. You developed intelligence for art, philosophy, and technology. But you never developed the deep cooperative instincts that emerge from shared struggle. This is why Death World species terrify you, Lisa said, understanding dawning in her voice. Not because we're violent, but because we're better at working together when everything goes wrong. The chamber erupted in arguments as different species began debating among themselves. Some delegates seemed horrified by the evidence of genocide, while others appeared to be defending the Council's actions. The Rigelian Collective has lost 3 colony worlds to environmental disasters in the past century, called out one delegate. If Death World species had been available to help, those worlds might still be inhabited. The Centauri Union has struggled with resource management on our outer worlds for generations, added another. These adaptive capabilities could have solved problems we've faced for centuries. Ambassador Zekthor raised his voice above the chaos. Even if these accusations have merit, the fact remains that Death World species represent an unacceptable risk. They breed too quickly, adapt too rapidly, and refuse to accept their place in the established order. They must be contained. No, Jake said firmly, his voice carrying across the chamber. We won't be contained, we won't be relocated, and we won't be silenced. The confrontation had reached its breaking point. Jake could see that the council was split. Some species were clearly horrified by what they had learned, while others seemed determined to maintain the status quo regardless of the cost. I call for an immediate vote, Ambassador Lyranus declared. All those in favor of suspending the Class Omega protocols pending a full investigation. Seconded, called out several voices from different parts of the chamber. This is madness, Zekthor protested. You cannot simply overturn 3,000 years of policy based on the testimony of dangerous primitives. We can, said a new voice, from the highest tier of the chamber. All eyes turned to see High Counselor Therendis, the ancient leader whose species had... Jake looked up at High Counselor Therendis, feeling the weight of thousands of years of galactic history pressing down on him. Every being in the chamber was watching, waiting for his response. The future of humanity, and possibly many other species, hung in the balance. High Counselor, Jake began, his voice steady despite the enormous pressure. We're not asking you to trust us because we're harmless. We're asking you to trust us because we're useful. Because diversity of thought and experience makes civilization stronger, not weaker. Your council has achieved remarkable stability, Lisa added, stepping up beside Jake. But stability without growth is stagnation. How many challenges have you faced that could have been solved by species with different perspectives? How many opportunities have you missed because you only included voices that agreed with each other? Jake activated one final display, showing a complex projection he had prepared during their time on the station. This is a projection based on our analysis of current galactic trends. Resource depletion on core worlds, declining birth rates, among council species technological stagnation, and increasing isolation from the galactic rim. The data painted a picture of a civilization in slow decline, magnificent but brittle. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled delegates as they recognized patterns they had seen in their own worlds. Death World species aren't your enemy, Jake continued. We're your future, not to replace you, but to work alongside you, to solve problems you can't solve alone, to go places you can't go, to ask questions you wouldn't think to ask. Dr. Vel Anya stepped forward again. I propose a new classification system. Instead of Class Omega, instead of dividing species into civilized and dangerous, we classify based on capability and specialization. Environmental specialists, technological innovators, social coordinators, artistic creators. A council based on what each species can contribute, Lisa said, instead of how similar they are to existing members. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. High Counselor Therendis closed his ancient eyes for a long moment, then opened them and looked directly at Jake and Lisa. 3,000 years ago, My people made first contact with the species that would become the founding members of this council. We were terrified of each other. Our differences seemed impossible to overcome, but we learned that our differences were also our greatest strengths. He stood slowly, his considerable height commanding the attention of every being in the chamber. However, he continued, the decision before us is not mine alone to make. This council operates by consensus, not decree. The motion before this council is clear. Immediate cessation of Class Omega protocols, full investigation of quarantine planet operations, and integration of surviving Death World species into the galactic community. Ambassador Zekthor's face went pale. High Counselor, surely you cannot seriously consider trusting these dangerous primitives. They have already demonstrated their willingness to break our laws and steal our secrets. We demonstrated our willingness to uncover the truth, Jake replied firmly. And the truth is that this council has been committing genocide for generations. I call for an immediate vote, Ambassador Lyranus declared, rising from her seat. Seconded, called out Ambassador Kavren of the Centauri Union, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights. The Galactic Council was founded on principles of peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity. These revelations suggest we have betrayed those very principles. We have preserved galactic stability for over 3,000 years, Zekthor countered desperately. Would you sacrifice that for the sake of dangerous primitives who cannot be trusted to follow civilized law? What law? Lisa shot back. The law that says entire species can be condemned to death because they're different? The law that says survival skills are a crime? The law that says only the weak deserve to live? The debate that followed was unlike anything the council chamber had ever seen. Species that had remained silent for decades were finally voicing long-suppressed doubts about the Class Omega protocols. Delegates who had never questioned council policy were demanding explanations for the quarantine planet operations. Ambassador Yithkar of the Vegan Confederacy stood up. The Vegan worlds have struggled with asteroid mining operations for centuries. We lose dozens of workers every year to hostile environments. If the HFY had been available to help, instead of being imprisoned, how many lives could have been saved? The Rigelian colonies have been abandoning outer rim worlds because they are too dangerous to maintain, added another delegate. These Death World species could have made those worlds livable. The Altair system has 3 worlds that are slowly dying because we can't adapt our technology to their changing environments, called out Ambassador Lyranus. We've been watching entire ecosystems collapse because we don't have the expertise to help them. Ambassador Zekthor and his faction fought back with increasing desperation, invoking ancient fears and prejudices. You forget the lessons of history, he declared. Chaos breeds chaos, disorder spreads like a disease. These species will not be content to help. They will seek to dominate. Like we've dominated this station? Jake asked. Like we've dominated this hearing? All we've done is tell the truth and ask for justice. You broke into our most secure databases, Zekthor accused. Because you were hiding evidence of mass murder, Lisa replied. If your actions were justified, why did you need to hide them? The momentum was clearly shifting toward the reformist faction, but Jake could see that fear still held sway over many delegates. Millennia of conditioning had taught them that order was more important than justice, that stability was more valuable than truth. Then Dr. Velanya stepped forward with a display that changed everything. Honored Council, she said, I have been analyzing the genetic records of quarantine planet populations. In every case, the species sent there have continued to evolve and adapt, even under the harsh conditions of imprisonment. The display showed genetic analysis charts that made several delegates gasp. The Mordun have developed the ability to digest cellulose directly, making them capable of surviving on vegetation that is toxic to most species. The HFY have evolved improved radiation resistance that would allow them to work in environments that are lethal to Council species. The WorldHFY have developed enhanced healing factors that could revolutionize medical treatment across the galaxy. Even under conditions designed to destroy them, she continued, these species have become more capable, not less. They have become exactly the kind of allies this galaxy needs to solve its greatest challenges. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates processed this information. Jake could see that the tide was turning, but Ambassador Zekthor made one last desperate attempt to maintain the status quo. Even if all of this is true, he declared, it changes nothing. These species are still too dangerous to be trusted. They will always be driven by the survival instincts that made them what they are. They cannot be civilized. Then explain this, Jake said, activating a recording he had made during their first day on the station. The recording showed Lisa sharing her food with a young alien maintenance worker who looked hungry. It showed Jake helping an injured crew member reach the medical bay. It showed both humans going out of their way to be kind and helpful, even while being treated as prisoners. Death World survival instincts, Jake said quietly, include cooperation, empathy, and mutual aid. Because on a Death World, no one survives alone. The chamber fell completely silent. Even Ambassador Zekthor seemed to have run out of arguments. High Counselor Therendis spoke into the silence. The vote will now commence. All those in favor of the motion to suspend Class Omega protocols and begin integration of Death World species into the galactic community. The voting began immediately, each species registering their decision through the Council's ancient procedures. Jake watched the display as votes were tallied, his heart pounding as the numbers shifted back and forth. 20 votes for the motion. 18 against, 9 abstentions. The count continued as more delegates made their decisions. 23 for, 20 against, 4 abstentions. The final vote was announced. 24 votes for the motion. 20 votes against, 3 abstentions. The motion passed. Ambassador Zekthor's face went ashen. This is madness. You will doom us all. On the contrary, High Counselor Therendis replied calmly, I believe we may finally be ready to fulfill our true potential. The chamber erupted in chaos as some delegates celebrated while others protested. But through it all, Jake felt a sense of profound relief. Humanity would not be the 18th species to disappear into quarantine. They had won. But as Jake looked around at the divided council, he realized that winning the vote was just the beginning. Now came the much harder task of proving that they deserved the trust they had been given. 3 months after the council vote, Captain Roy Henderson stood on the Bridge of the Liberty as they approached the first of the quarantine planets. Rescue fleets from dozens of council species were coming together at all 17 worlds, bringing supplies, medical aid, and most importantly, apologies. The planet below them looked harsh and unwelcoming. Rocky surfaces stretched as far as the eye could see, with only small patches of struggling vegetation. This was quarantine planet Epsilon 9, home to the surviving HFY who had been imprisoned here for over 2 centuries. Captain, Communications. Officer Steve Adams reported, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Let's hear it. The voice that came through the speakers was rough, but strong, speaking in the translated language of the HFY. Human vessels, this is Colonial Administrator Morthek. We had given up hope that anyone would come. Thank you. Henderson smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't expected. Administrator Morthek, this is Captain Henderson of the Human Federation. We're here to take you home. Home? The voice carried confusion and disbelief. We have been here for 8 generations. Our children have never seen our homeworld. Many of us believed it no longer existed. It exists, Henderson assured him, and it's waiting for you. All of your worlds are waiting. The rescue operation took weeks. The HFY had adapted to their harsh prison planet, but they were severely malnourished and their population had dropped from 2.3 billion to barely 400 million. Medical teams from across the galaxy worked around the clock to treat diseases that had spread unchecked for decades. Jake found himself working directly with HFY scientists, and he was amazed by what they had accomplished with so few resources. They had developed new forms of agriculture that could grow food in toxic soil. They had created medical treatments using only plants that grew on their prison planet. They had maintained their scientific knowledge and culture despite being cut off from the galaxy for generations. "Your people are remarkable," Jake told Administrator Morthek as they toured a HFY research facility that had been built in underground caves. "We survived," Morthek replied simply. "That is what we do. But Dr. Martinez, we did not just survive. We learned. We grew. We are not the same people who were brought here centuries ago." That turned out to be true for all the quarantine planet. Survivors. The Mordun had developed incredible efficiency in resource usage. The Vorthak had evolved enhanced healing abilities. The Thalnari had adapted to survive in near-vacuum conditions. Each species had not just endured their imprisonment, but had become more capable because of it. The integration process was not easy. Many council species were still afraid of the Death World survivors. There were protests on several worlds when HFY families were relocated to council planets. Some delegates continued to argue that the whole integration program was a mistake, but slowly, things began to change. The first breakthrough came when a Rigelian colony world was hit by a massive solar storm that knocked out all their technology and poisoned their atmosphere. The Council's rescue efforts were failing, and millions of lives were at risk. A team of Thalnari volunteers arrived at the colony and worked for 3 straight days in the poisoned atmosphere, without any protective equipment. They repaired critical systems, evacuated the most vulnerable colonists, and helped establish emergency shelters. When the rescue fleet finally arrived, they found that the Thalnari had already saved most of the colony. The second breakthrough came when the Vegan Confederacy's main asteroid mining operation suffered a catastrophic collapse that trapped hundreds of workers in a radioactive environment. HFY rescue teams were able to reach areas that were lethal to council species and brought out every single trapped miner alive. The third breakthrough came when a previously unknown disease began spreading through the Centauri Union. Council. Medical teams were baffled, but Mordun researchers identified the pathogen and developed a cure within days, using techniques they had learned during their centuries of medical isolation. One by one, the galaxy began to understand what Jake and Lisa had tried to tell them in the council chamber. Deathworld species weren't threats to be contained. They were solutions to problems that had seemed impossible. Lisa found herself leading joint engineering projects that included species from across the galaxy. Her team was working on a new type of starship that could explore regions of space that had been considered too dangerous for council vessels. "It's funny," she told Jake during one of their regular communication calls. "A year ago, they were ready to lock us up forever because we were too dangerous. Now they can't get enough of our danger." Jake was working with the reformed Galactics Council to establish new exploration and research programs. The Council had been renamed the Galactic Cooperation, and it now included representatives from over 60 species, including all the quarantine planet survivors. "The real change isn't in the policies," Jake replied. "It's in how they think. They're starting to see diversity as strength instead of threat." The proof of that change came when the Galactic Cooperation announced its most ambitious project ever, a joint expedition to explore the galaxy's dangerous outer rim, regions that council species had never dared to visit. The expedition would be led by a mixed crew including humans, HFY, Mordun, Thalnari, and volunteers from 12 council species. Their ship, designed using technology from all participating species, would be capable of surviving environments that would destroy any previous vessel. Ambassador Lyranis, who had become the first speaker of the Reformed Council, made the announcement at a ceremony attended by representatives from across the galaxy. 6 months ago, we believed that safety came from excluding those who were different from us, she said. Today, we understand that safety comes from including as many different perspectives as possible. The unknown is less frightening when you have allies who specialize in handling the unknown. High Counselor Therendis, now serving as an advisory. Role in the new structure, watch the ceremony with obvious satisfaction. After the formal presentations, he approached Jake and Lisa privately. Dr. Martinez, Engineer Thompson, he said, I wanted to thank you personally, not just for exposing the truth about the quarantine planets, but for showing us a better way forward. We just told the truth, Jake replied. You and the other delegates made the choice to listen. It was a choice that required courage, Therendis acknowledged. Many civilizations would have chosen to maintain comfortable lies rather than face difficult truths. Speaking of truth, Lisa said with a grin, we've received some interesting reports from our Outer Rim exploration teams. It seems there are more inhabited worlds out there than anyone expected. And some of them might qualify as what you used to call death worlds. Therendis's ancient eyes sparkled with something that might have been anticipation. And what do you propose we do about that? Same thing we did with ourselves, Jake said. Make contact, learn from them, see what they can teach us. See what we can teach them. The galaxy is much larger and more diverse than any of us imagined, Lisa added, and that's a good thing. As they spoke, reports were coming in from across the galaxy about the positive changes that integration had brought. Agricultural yields were up on worlds that had adopted more done farming techniques. Medical treatment success rates had improved dramatically with WorldHFY healing methods. Mining operations were safer and more efficient thanks to HFY environmental adaptation. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy's exploration and scientific advancement had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. With Death World species serving as advanced scouts and problem solvers, the galactic cooperation was discovering new worlds, new resources, and new forms of life at an unprecedented rate. 5 years after the Great Integration, Ambassador Jake Martinez stood before a gathering of representatives from over 300 species, more than 10 times the size of the old council. The new galactic cooperation was messy, chaotic, and frequently frustrating. It was also the most dynamic and rapidly advancing civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Today, Jake announced to the assembly, I'm proud to report that the Andromeda Gateway project has reached completion. Thanks to Death World engineering techniques, environmental adaptation protocols, and the combined resources of 67 different species, we now have the capability to establish permanent contact with our neighboring galaxy. The applause that followed came from beings that 5 years ago would have been deemed too dangerous to exist. Now they were partners in the greatest adventure any of them could imagine. Commander Jake Morrison walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. His black uniform looked plain next to the bright colors and strange shapes of the alien delegates around him. The room was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Crystal walls stretched up so high that he could barely see the ceiling. Jake had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded ships across human space. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Today, humanity would ask to join the advanced members of the Galactic Federation. Today, they would learn if humans were good enough to sit with the most powerful species in the galaxy. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked beside him. She wore the same black uniform, but her job was different. Where Jake was a fighter, Lisa was a talker. She had spent 5 years learning alien languages and customs. She knew which species liked formal speech and which ones preferred direct conversation. Today, all that knowledge would be tested. Behind them walked Dr. Amy Walsh and engineer Mike Torres. Amy carried a datapad filled with information about human science and technology. Mike had worked on the ship that brought them here. Both of them looked nervous but excited. This was their chance to show what humans could do. The chamber filled. with sounds that hurt their ears. 12 different species spoke in voices that ranged from deep rumbles to high squeaks. Some aliens looked almost human, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were so strange that Jake had trouble understanding how they moved. High Counselor Vexthera stood at the center of the room. She had 6 arms and skin that looked like blue metal. Her race, the Zephyrians, could control energy with their minds. They could make lightning jump between their fingers and create force fields around their bodies. Jake had seen videos of Zephyrian soldiers lifting tanks with their thoughts. "The human delegation may approach," Vexthera said. Her voice sounded like wind blowing through metal pipes. Jake, Lisa, Amy, and Mike walked to the center of the room. Around them, aliens of every shape and size watched with what looked like amusement. The ethereals were tall, thin beings who could walk through solid walls. They flickered in and out of sight like ghosts. The Mindari looked like large insects, with too many eyes. They could talk to each other without making any sound, sharing thoughts across vast distances. Lisa stepped forward and bowed in the way she had practiced. "Honored counselors, humanity requests membership in the advanced tier of the Galactic Federation." The room erupted in sounds that might have been laughter. The gastropods, who looked like giant slugs, oozed green liquid that bubbled and popped. The hive minds clicked their sharp teeth together in a rhythm that sounded mocking. Counselor Zix floated above his seat. His people were made of pure energy and could change shape at will. He glowed with different colors as he spoke. "Humans," he said, "what makes you think you belong here? What special abilities do your people possess?" Dr. Walsh stepped forward, with her data pad ready. "We have developed fusion technology, faster than light travel, and advanced computing systems. Our scientists have mapped the human genome and created medicines that can cure many diseases." "Fusion technology," repeated Counselor Thek. The reptilian being's scales changed color from green to yellow. "How primitive. Our children play with fusion reactors as toys." Another delegate stood up. Counselor Maktar belonged to a species that could live in the vacuum of space. His people breathed radiation instead of air. "Humans still use chemical rockets to leave their planet's surface. We abandoned such crude methods 10,000 years ago." Jake felt his anger rising, but he kept his face calm. He had expected this reaction. Humans were the newest species in the galaxy. They had only developed space travel 300 years ago. Most of these aliens had been flying between stars since before humans invented the wheel. "Your faster-than-light travel is inefficient," said another counselor. This one looked like a tree with eyes. "You tear holes in space instead of flowing with its natural currents. Your method damages the fabric of reality itself." Lisa tried again. "What we lack in advanced technology, we make up for in other ways. Humans are adaptable. We can survive in many different environments. We learn quickly and work well together." This brought more of what sounded like laughter. Vexthera's 6 arms waved in dismissal. "Adaptability is not a special trait. Every successful species must adapt or die. As for working together, you humans still fight wars among yourselves. Your planet is divided into hundreds of competing nations." "At least we don't destroy entire star systems in our conflicts," Jake said before he could stop himself. The chamber went quiet. Several counselors turned colors that probably meant anger. Counselor Zix's glow shifted to a dangerous red. "Dare to criticize us?" Vexthera's voice rose to a shriek. "We have maintained peace in this galaxy for 1,000,000 years. We protect primitive species like yours from dangers you cannot imagine." Dr. Walsh quickly pulled out more data. "Perhaps if we could show you our medical advances, human doctors have found ways to regrow lost limbs and repair damaged brains. The Regenerous can regrow their entire bodies from a single cell," said Counselor Maktar. "Your medicine is crude butchery compared to biological reconstruction." Engineer Torres spoke for the first time. Our ships may be simple, but they're reliable. We've never lost a vessel to mechanical failure in over 50 years of space travel. Because your ships are so basic that there is nothing complex enough to break, laughed another counselor. A wooden cart is also reliable, but we do not consider it advanced transportation. The formal presentation continued for 2 more hours. Every human achievement was dismissed as primitive. Every human strength was called a weakness. When Lisa showed videos of human cities, the aliens pointed out that their buildings were small and ugly. When Amy demonstrated human computers, they showed devices that could think faster than entire human cities. The vote, when it finally came, was not even close. 11 species voted against humanity's advancement. Only Counselor Thek abstained, his scales shifting through colors that Lisa could not read. The decision is final, Vexithara announced. Humanity lacks the sophisticated abilities required for advanced membership. You may continue to trade basic resources and provide manual labor for more developed civilizations. Perhaps in a few thousand years, your species will evolve beyond its current limitations. Jake felt the blood rush to his face. Manual labor. They saw humans as nothing more than workers barely smart enough to carry boxes and dig holes. As security guards began to escort them out, Counselor Thek approached. The reptilian being was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales were pale and marked with scars from some ancient conflict. Commander Morrison, Thek said quietly, making sure the other counselors could not hear. Do not take this rejection too seriously. I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen many species rise and fall. The galaxy has a way of teaching hard lessons to those who become too proud. What do you mean? Jake asked. Thek's scales shifted to a pattern that Lisa recognized as deep concern. Your people have something that most of us have forgotten. You still remember how to struggle. You still know how to fight when everything seems hopeless. That knowledge may prove more valuable than all our advanced technologies. Before Jake could ask more questions, Thek moved away. The guards pushed the human delegation toward the exit. As they walked through the crystal corridors, Jake could hear the aliens behind them talking and laughing. To them, humans were just another primitive species that had gotten ideas above their station. Admiral Ben Carter was waiting for them aboard the human ship Defiance. The ship looked small and ugly compared to the alien vessels around it. The alien ships glowed with energy and seemed to bend light around them. The Defiance was just metal and ceramic, painted white with blue stripes. How did it go? Carter asked, though their faces already told him the answer. About as well as we expected, Lisa said. They see us as manual laborers, nothing more. Amy was already analyzing the data she had gathered during the meeting. Their technology is incredible, but it's also incredibly complex. I saw energy readings that don't make sense. They're using 10 times more power than they need for simple tasks. Mike nodded as he reviewed the engineering data. Their ships are beautiful, but I wouldn't want to repair one. Too many systems that depend on each other. If one thing breaks, the whole ship might stop working. Admiral Carter looked out at the alien vessels surrounding them. Each one was a work of art, flowing and graceful in ways that human ships could never match. But Jake found himself thinking about Thek's words. The galaxy had a way of teaching hard lessons to the proud. Take us home, Carter ordered. We have work to do. As the Defiance pulled away from the station, Jake watched the Galactic Council chamber grow smaller in the distance. The aliens inside were still celebrating their superiority, confident in their advanced technologies and special abilities. They had no idea that their rejection of humanity would soon prove to be the biggest mistake in galactic history. The long journey back to human space gave them all time to think. They had been humiliated, dismissed, and insulted, but they were. Still alive, still free, and still determined to prove themselves. Sometimes, Jake thought, The children born in these mixed colonies represented something new in galactic history. Human children grew up with access to scientific concepts that their parents could barely understand. Alien children learned to value simplicity and reliability over complexity and elegance. 1 year after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, Admiral Carter received a message that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. A new species had been discovered in a distant galaxy, and they were asking for help in developing their civilization. The message had been routed through the Galactic Council, but it was addressed specifically to humanity. "They want us to teach them," Carter told his senior staff. "A species we've never met, from a galaxy we've never visited, and they want to learn human engineering principles." Dr. Walsh looked up from her research reports. "Word is S,"